This episode of Fall Obsession Podcast is brought to you guys by Hoot Camo. I absolutely love my Hoot Camo gear. I've worn it on several different hunts in multiple different states, lots of different environments, anywhere from needing their lightweight stuff to their heavyweight stuff. I wear just their everyday lifestyle gear on almost a daily basis, it seems like. Hoot's got something for everybody. Their patterns are incredible, versatile, adapt to different environments that they're in based on what your backdrop is. That's the whole point of the concept behind the owl being the motivation for their camo patterns and what it's all based off of. So go check out Hoot Camo and everything that they have to offer at hootcamo.com. And if you want to place an order, use the code FALLOBSESSION15 and that will save you guys some money at checkout. Hoot Camo. I want to give a special shout out in this podcast to one of our general Fall Obsession partners, Dark Energy. During this episode, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about our 2024 Idaho elk hunt. And when we were in the mountains up there in Idaho, we had a ton of Dark Energy gear up there with us, and we used so much of it to keep our devices and our cameras and all of our gear and everything charged up and ready to go. Dark Energy has something for everybody with their portable power, whether it is their Poseidon, either the full-size one or the Nano, or their Spectre panels, whatever it might be. You guys need to check them out if you're looking for a reliable, long-lasting, durable, portable power unit of any kind. Go check out Dark Energy and use the code FALLOBSESSION. That's all lowercase with a space in between fall and obsession, and that will save you guys some money at checkout. Dark Energy. Go look them up. News on Safaris is a Fall Obsession partner. We have several people that we know both within and outside of our organization that have hunted with News On and have had a good experience. So if you guys are looking to book that next big African safari that you've been saving up for and anticipating, you need to do it with News On. And the best part about it is that News On Safaris is offering Fall Obsession podcast listeners some savings on their next safari, as long as you just tell them that Fall Obsession sent you. If you give Tim a call, you guys will get a $500 trophy credit. Your food, lodging, and drinks will all be covered. Your professional hunter, tracker, and skinner fees are going to be covered, and your basic trophy prep is taken care of. That's a $2,250 value per hunter, and that's valid for up to 4 people in your hunting party. Do the quick math on that. You could be saving up to $9,000 on what is already an expensive trip, no matter how you look at it. So again, call Tim. His number's 303-946-9441. Again, that's Tim, and tell him that Fall Obsession sent you, and book that safari with News On. Trophy Edits is a Fall Obsession partner. I'm sure that we have all had those photos over the years, or maybe even already this season, where it's a big moment, a big memory, maybe a big deer that you or your kid or your family member just shot, and you're looking forward to seeing that picture, and it just doesn't do the moment justice. You were hoping for more. Maybe the lighting was off, it was too dark, maybe it's blurry, out of focus, whatever it might be. Well, Trophy Edits can do everything in their power to clean that up for you and make the most out of that memory and capturing it for you. So if you go to the link in the description on this podcast, that will send you over to them and let them know that you came from us as well. We appreciate that. And shop around, see what they can do for you. They got a ton of different options on there. Go check out Trophy Edits. Elite Archery is a Fall Obsession partner. I've been shooting an Elite bow for several seasons now. No intentions of switching. I absolutely love it. It is the most shootable bow on the market, in my opinion. Go to your local Elite dealer and take that Elite Shootability Challenge. Put it in your hand, shoot it a few times, compare it to other brands, and let the results speak for themselves. You won't be disappointed. Even Elite themselves tells you that that's what you should do. Go take the Elite Shootability Challenge today. The Outdoor Call Radio app is a podcast partner. Outdoors Dan from Respect the Game TV, he has created an app that you can download on any device where you can stream hunting shows and podcasts on a loop every single day. Fall Obsession Podcast plays on that loop on Mondays. That's the same day as our new publications, as well as a lot of other hunting shows and podcasts that we all know and love. So go download the app today. It is free and you can start listening immediately. And be sure that you follow them on social media, because Outdoors Dan is on a couple of different live radio shows, a couple different times a week. And even if you're not local to those stations, he shares those broadcasts on his Facebook Live. The Outdoor Call Radio app, go check him out. Ridge Rock Hunt Company is a Fall Obsession partner. Derek Eves in Mississippi, he is the man. He's got a large network of vetted and trusted outfitters through Ridge Rock Hunt Company that he sets all of his clients up with and guarantees a good experience. So if you're looking to book that next North American hunting adventure, you need to let Derek Eves do all the hard work for you. He'll find something that is right for you. Go check him out, Ridge Rock Hunt Company. I want to thank you guys for tuning in to another Fall Obsession podcast. If you enjoy this episode, if you find value in our content, if you like the show, please leave us a review wherever you guys are streaming from. We always appreciate that. And be sure that you are following and or subscribe to the show, depending on what the button up there says for you. And turn your notifications on if that's an option. We put out new podcast episodes every single week as to our best of our ability. So we hope that you guys will continue streaming, continue listening, or even go back and listen to some old episodes if you haven't caught up yet. Go to our website, fallobsession.com. All of our content filters through there, and you can also pick you up a hat or a shirt, a decal, whatever it might be, something to support a small-time hunting brand. And be sure you check out our shows that are streaming on Carbon TV. We are a hunting and outdoor media production company. We produce so many different shows and films and varieties of different content. And this podcast, our staff-inspired video podcast series called Couch Chats, as well as our two different hunting shows, Texas Dirt and Midwest Mindset, all of those stream on Carbon TV, as well as tons of other hunting shows that you can watch for free from that platform. So go check out everything going on over at Carbon, and be sure that you are following Fall Obsession on all the major social media platforms. That way you stay up to date and in the loop with everything that our extraordinary team has going on, literally on a daily basis, especially during hunting season. With that, I'm going to hit play on the intro, and then we're going to dive into our conversation today, reflecting a little bit more on our 2024 Idaho elk hunt. You're listening to another Fall Obsession podcast.
Oh, you got her, dude. She's down. Let's go.
Dude, I just shot a deer of a lifetime.
Freaking smoked him.
One with nature, and if you're a believer, one with God.
Definitely gets your heart pumping. Boy, you are in trouble.
Fall Obsession Podcast.
What's up, guys? Thanks for hanging with me for another Fall Obsession podcast episode. My name is Sam Thrash. I'm your host over here at Fall Obsession. Appreciate y'all tuning in. I'm knocking out another solo podcast. I tend to seem to do these now, I don't know, every several weeks it seems like for various reasons and everything. But this one is not for a filler episode or just because there's a certain thing that's hot on my mind or anything like that. This was a very intentional podcast that I wanted to record. And as you guys know, especially if you listen to last week's episode, the 2024 Idaho elk episode that was live from Elk Camp between myself and the other three guys that were up there with me, Galen, Chris, and Ben. You guys know that I just went on this epic and incredible experience. I'm back in Texas now. At the time I'm recording this, I've been out of the mountains for, I think, 8 days now. So I want to take a moment to kind of walk back through the experience in greater detail with you guys, to talk more about it, and just to kind of share with you guys where my head was at through the entire week and as things went on, because this was a very unique trip for a Texas boy like me, or a flatlander, as the guys up there kept calling me, which they're not wrong. And that's the first thing that probably kicked my butt up there, was just the altitude. I'll get into kind of the sequence of events and us getting up there. I want to do that in this episode, but the first couple, 2-3 days were challenging for me just because I was kind of getting sick, it seemed like, kind of altitude related stuff. And that kicked my butt for the first little bit. And then by the end of it, I was getting my stamina back. I was getting acclimated. I was feeling better, like physically and internally. But then that's when my bad decisions when it came to footwear and some of my lack of preparation for the trip, that's when that stuff started to catch up to me, because we were hiking through crazy stuff every single day. And yeah, it was challenging because I took two different pairs of boots. One of them was just like a kind of a general multi-purpose boot that I just have down here, and that's actually what I ended up wearing for most of the week, because the other pair that I took were my hunting boots from down here in Texas, which are also snake boots, and not at all the right choice of footwear to have up there. I wore them one time and then put them back in the bag and wore the other ones the rest of the time. Lesser of two evils. So I was struggling in one degree or another throughout the week, and I mentioned it last week in the podcast in the intro. I'm very grateful for the guys I was up there with, not just them being experienced in this environment, if you will, or having the right gear themselves, but they carried some of my weight as I was dragging, and I felt bad about that. It's not something that any guy wants to have happen, where you're leaning on other guys a lot to help you through a hunt. But that is kind of how it played out. So I'm very grateful to Galen, Chris, and Ben for helping me get through the week and everything. But this trip was, I won't say it's as extreme of an elk hunt as you could possibly get, but it's a lot to bite off for sure for somebody like me going on my very first elk hunt. There was no camp lodge or anything like that. There's no vehicles out there, if you will. We are packing in on horseback, and I knew that going into it, but I also didn't realize how far back we were going. And even if somebody tells you you're from the trailhead, you're going 25 miles back on horses, even if somebody says that to you, it truly doesn't sit in, I feel like, until you are actually in it, until it's actually a reality for you. And it certainly didn't for me. I was looking forward to a week of being unplugged, of being off the grid, if you will. And there was definitely a large aspect of that I benefited from and that I enjoyed. But at the same time, like being that out of touch from your family and that far away from your family, that's a reality that I had never experienced in that extent before, and something that you have to be able to wrap your mind around. So for the first couple days, like, that was a little bit of a struggle for me. It was like, man, we are way back in here, and if something happens to us back here, we're screwed. And if something happens back home, we're on a good day. Like, from the time we get notified, I don't know, 15, 16, 17 hours from getting out of here and getting back to them. So that was a reality that took a minute to kind of wrap your head around up there. But I got to give a lot of credit to, like I already mentioned, the guys that were up there, but Galen Barnett, he knows his stuff. He's been doing these pack trips for the last 22 years. Ever since he was 10 years old, he's been involved in this in a growing extent. And it was pretty incredible to watch. We were using his dad's string of horses and mules, and man, they were squared away. They were ready for this kind of stuff. It was obvious that they had done this before, and the country that we were in does not favor them, if you will. Doesn't favor anything. It's beautiful and brutal at the same time. Literally, as we're riding in, well, first off, we're like 19 miles off of, I don't know if it was off the blacktop or just from the next town, whatever it might be, but we're a ways back into this mountain driving with a horse trailer just to get to the trailhead. And then from the trailhead to where we camped was another 25 miles. We went back, and some of you are probably wondering, like, man, why so far? Why do you have to go so far back in there? Is there not elk closer? And again, this is something that Galen does every year, sometimes multiple times a year, for the better part of his life. So he's very familiar with these trips and everything. Well, um, there there was a certain goal that he had, if you will. He wanted to get back into this particular spot that nobody had been in a very long time. He had talked to one, from my understanding, that is one old timer that had been back in here years and years ago, had a little campsite set up in this little meadow, and everything, and that's where he wanted to get to, but nobody had been back there in forever. So that was his goal, is he wanted to get back there, and he knew that it was going to be challenging, not just from a distance and a stamina point, but with all the deadfall in the area from wildfires over the years, trees falling over the trail. He knew that it was going to be difficult to get the horses in there, and that there'd be spots where we probably would have to cross cut our way through it and that kind of stuff. So we went into it with a mentality of we're going to have to work just to get to camp, but hey, we're up for it. We're game. Let's do it. So, and he had a friend that has a plane and had flown the area that we were going to hunt previously, and had been able to, from that standpoint, confirm that, okay, there's elk on these mountains, there's elk in these hills, there is a big elk herd in here that we can hunt. So that was kind of confirmation for us that we were going to a good spot. So riding in, we got to the trailhead. Galen actually had to reshoe a couple of horses at the trailhead before we rode in. He previously, years ago, was a farrier, so he knows his stuff with horses and shoeing them and stuff. So he shoed a couple of them himself, and we loaded up and headed in. We rode about 6 miles in the first afternoon, and then had a nice spot to camp and everything, and then loaded back up the next morning and finished the journey in. We got most of the way there to where, from the ridge that we were on, we could actually look down and see the meadow that we were going to be hunting in, and that's when the work started. That's when we had to start really working to clear trail and get down into where we were going to be able to camp. Got in there before dark, got our camp set up, got the horses tied up. The next day, they wanted to hunt higher up on kind of the next mountain or hill, whatever you want to call it, over. And we were camping at about 6,800 feet, and we were going to hunt at about 8,200 feet. And the goal was to clear trail going up that next hill so that we could ride the horses to the top and hunt from the top down on both sides. So that's what we did. It was a better half of a day, again, clearing trail and working our way up the mountain and stuff. So we got busy with that. A lot of work for the first couple days. And again, like I mentioned in the beginning, I was struggling from a health standpoint, just feeling sick, my stomach churning. I had a headache. Unfortunately for me, I had misplaced my little toiletry bag that didn't just have my toothbrush and deodorant and that kind of stuff in it, but it also had like some pain meds and stuff for headache and that kind of thing. So I was struggling a little bit those first couple days, and that's what kicked my butt the most at that time. But the country was absolutely incredible. You like photos, videos, talking about it, certainly on a show, it doesn't do it justice to actually be in there and experience it. And before we get too far away from it, I should talk about the ride in too, because just you're literally going across this 2-foot, sometimes smaller, single track trail that one side of it just drops straight down, either onto a grassy hillside or a rocky ledge, whatever it might be. And like for a Flatlander, that's a bit of a butt puckering moment, because you're like, golly, that's straight down. I hope this horse knows where they're walking. And you had to put a lot of trust in those animals. And again, very grateful for animals that had done that before and knew what they were doing, and that we were fortunate to not have any wrecks or issues in regards to the animals. We had a couple times that things got a little close maybe, but everybody came through it, including the horses and mules, unscathed, which was good. But you're riding through this country, and you'll be riding through a thick patch of trees or brush, whatever it might be, and then it'll just suddenly open up into a hillside, and you're at the top of this mountain, and you can see, I don't know, for miles and just tens of thousands of acres in front of your face, just look out, overlooking everything with a river running through it. It's just like, pictures aren't this beautiful. Like, you have to experience it to truly understand the magnitude of the country that you're in. Literally, very few people get to see this kind of country, and I was very grateful to be one of them that has been able to see it in this extent. But okay, so we clear trail, we get our path established going back up the mountain and everything, so that now there's less walking from a stance of getting from camp to where we're going to hunt. We can now saddle horses and ride horses up to the top every day, time up there, and be able to hunt down from there. Elk sign everywhere. Like tracks, scat, you had rubs that some of them going 10 to 12 feet into a tree, just obvious herd of elk and big bulls that were in that area. But at this point, if you count the first day, like I labeled this as just day one being the first day that we rode in, day two being the second day riding in and then establishing camp, day three being half clearing trail, half hunting, and day four being hunting, and etc. so on. That's kind of how I'm looking at it, not from a standpoint of how many days we got to hunt, but day three, day four is when the hunt really ramped up, and when we got to start actually trying to play these bulls and everything. The weather was phenomenal. We couldn't have asked for better weather until really the last afternoon. I'll get to that later. But the one thing that we had to combat a lot was the wind. There was one side of this mountain in particular that was just super, super windy. And it's elk country, as I've already said, no doubt about that. But I feel like the wind was pushing these elk and this herd down deep into some of these valleys and into the thicker trees, the thicker timber. And with the wind, we were having a hard time actually being able to call out and try to draw them out of there. And there were a few times that we would kind of try to dive down in there and kind of go after them a little bit. And again, to no avail. And there's so much country. There's so many different valleys and draws and stuff that they can be hiding in. And, without visually being able to confirm that they're in one, it's hard to pick what your tactic's going to be. So it was an awesome place to be. We were seeing the sign of the elk everywhere, but even Galen was kind of scratching his head like, man, where are they? What are they doing? And I understand that, you're bringing guys out there that have tags and that want to kill an elk and everything. And then I, with my archery only mentality, have a whole nother element to it on, I got to get one in bow range. So that adds another challenge and everything. And I'll talk briefly about our mentality behind that too, because Chris, he had an elk tag. Galen had an elk tag. They're both hunting with rifles. I have an elk tag, but I'm hunting with a bow. Ben had a bear tag, and I can't remember if he had a cat tag or not, but no elk tag for him, but he was coming along to more so experience the pack trip, because he had never elk hunted with horses like what we were doing and everything. So he was just coming along as an extra hand, and if he ended up getting a shot at something he had a tag for, then that was kind of a bonus. But so the mentality for the hunting party in general was, if we got a bull to play ball, we were going to try to get to call him into bow range for me, and if that was unsuccessful, then Chris would take him with a rifle. Chris had never shot an elk before, and this was actually a hunt for Chris's first big game animal, period. So trying to get him to notch his first tag as well. So we go through a couple days of just seeing tons of sign, but not hearing any elk, not seeing any elk. And of course, when you're that far back, you're like, man, what is going on? Like, where they got to be back here somewhere. So it was day 5. We spent the first part of the day hunting on the windier side of the mountain, overlooking a huge area. Like, it was one of the prettiest and most broad outlooks we had the entire week. I felt like we could just from one spot glass and we could see so much country. So we spent a good amount of time there on that hillside, and when we had enough of the wind, because it was just ringing in our ears and we were kind of getting cold sitting there, we hopped back over the mountain, went to the other side, worked our way down to this little knob. And earlier that day, that was the day that Ben actually split from us and went and sat on a different hillside. But we had met up with him earlier in the day, and he had told us that he had seen one elk in this particular draw. And that's the draw that we made our way back to and we're looking down into. And so we get there, Galen has an elk call and lets out a bugle, and immediately I hear far, far away off to my right and down in the valley, I hear a bull answer. And I look at Galen and I'm like, I just heard one. And no disrespect to Galen, because I'm a Texas boy, and ever since we got up there, I've been hearing the wind howling through trees and stuff, and I've been trying to depict, like, am I hearing a faint bugle or am I not? What am I hearing? And he looked at me, he's like, are you sure it wasn't the wind? It's like, no, I heard one. That is for sure not the wind. That was a bull. It's way far away, but that was a bull. So Galen gave it a couple of minutes, and then he let out another bugle, and the bull answered back again, and this time he was much closer down this valley. We still couldn't see him, but we heard him, and there was no doubt. We were 100% certain, like, okay, we got one that's playing the game. So Galen and I are side by side. I'm bow hunting. He pulls out the camera and starts videoing and everything. Chris is about 30, 40 feet kind of up the hill and to our left behind us with a rifle. And at the time, he was just videoing because, again, we're trying to play a bull to get him in close. So Galen saw him first. He saw literally just the way the sun was shining. He saw the bull's shadow coming at the bottom of this little draw before he ever saw the bull, and it was really cool. This bull starts working his way up toward us. He was probably, when we first laid eyes on him, he was probably more than 100 yards away from us. And I'm getting ready and everything. And this was something that, you know, you've thought about, you've practiced with your bow as far as shooting at angles and everything. My rangefinder has an archery setting, so when I range at a severe angle, right, it gives me the actual reading, and then it gives me a reading to compensate for the angle as far as what I need to adjust my sight to. So I was paying attention to both of those, but just with all of the deadfall and the brush, it was so thick in there that I was having such a hard time getting my rangefinder to read. I would range the same thing 2 or 3 times and get 2 or 3 completely different, like far different readings on all of these things. And I'm like, what is going on? How am I going to figure this out? And I'm adjusting my sight every time I feel like I get a good reading and stuff. Because I'm with the mentality of, I'm on a Western hunt. I practice long-range archery for this purpose, and if I get a bull under 100 yards, I'm flinging an arrow. So Galen's working him with a cow call at this point, and the bull himself is working his way up the hill toward us, and finally I range an opening, what looks like an opening to me, that this bull's about to step into, and I range it at, I don't remember what the actual range is, but where I needed my sight to compensate with the angle was 51 yards, or 50.8, I think is what my rangefinder said. So I adjust my sight, and I tell Galen, I'm like, right here. And I go, as soon as the bull like has his head turned away, I go ahead and draw back. I'm at full draw with this bull in my sight picture. And he steps into that opening, and he stops broadside perfectly in that opening. And I have 3 branches on a deadfall tree that are sticking up and in the way of his vital signs. And Galen's right next to me filming, and it will be in the film that we're putting together on this hunt. You guys will get to see it. They were just, I know that I'm going to have a little bit of an arc at that range with my bow, but the branches are just too high. I'm like, they're too close together, they're too high. I'm like, I cannot thread one in there at this distance. If that was 20 yards, yeah, I could thread one in there. But at 51, with the angle and as tall as those branches were, I was like, it's not happening. And I told Galen, I said, I don't have a shot. I don't have a shot. So I wait until the bull looks away and continues to walk, and his head's hidden from me, and I let back down. And there's another opening coming up again that I start ranging and going through the whole sequence again to try and, maybe get a shot there. But before the bull steps into that opening, he starts to get a little skittish. And we've been playing him for a long time at this point. And this bull, I should say too, and you guys may have seen pictures by now, this bull, he's not a monster or anything like that. He's probably a 3-year-old bull, I'd say. But again, being on a western hunt, going after my very first elk with a bow, I'm not being picky. Like, that's the last thing in my mind is being picky. I am going to shoot the first legal bull that I have a shot at, is my thought process. So he starts getting skittish on the backside of this rock, out of sight from me and Galen. Galen can see him a little bit so he can understand what his body language is. I can't see him at this point. And he starts kind of angling away from us, and as soon as he starts angling away, it's like, all right, archery shot is out. So Galen looks up the hill at Chris. He's like, Chris, take him. And Chris has been videoing me the whole time with his cell phone. And Chris throws his phone off to the side and scoops up his rifle. And as this bull is kind of moving up and away from him, hard quartering away, Chris throws his gun up, shoots him, and ends up dropping him right there on the hillside. Chris's first bull. We were all so excited. It was actually kind of funny. Chris shoots, drops this bull, and then Galen's so excited. Galen looks over at me. He's like, "Hey, are you good with that?" I'm like, "Of course I'm good with it, dude. Like, come on, man." But it was funny. Like, we could go back and rewind if I wasn't good with it. But I was excited. Chris was excited. I'm convinced that Galen was the most excited out of all of us, and he was the last guy that was going to shoot in that scenario. He'd been filming the whole thing, or almost the entire thing, and he told us later, he's like, I've never played one that long. It's like, I've always rifle hunted, so as soon as I would see one that I was going to shoot, we just shoot it, and that was that. He says, I never hunted with a bow hunter. I've never played one to the point where we could get it in bow range or anything like that. So it was a really cool experience for him, and he was just jacked with adrenaline at that point. He was just pumped for both of us, and I was super excited, and this was a moment too that was kind of unique for me and something that I hadn't experienced to this extent. We each have an elk tag on the side of this mountain, and while Chris is the one that pulled the trigger, that killed the elk, that punched his tag, that has taken home the meat, that formally and officially can say that he has killed his first elk, it was all of our experience. It was all of our hunt, and we share that in common, which is really unique to me. Again, I've never had anything like that happen to that extent, to where this bull, while it is Chris's, it also felt like all of ours at the same time. It was a group effort. It was a group push to make this happen, and so many different things fell into place to where, like I said, I was going to have a shot with a bow, and then I didn't, and up until I didn't, like, everybody was all about Sam getting a shot with a bow, and then as soon as that opportunity's out the window, everybody's all about Chris getting a shot with a rifle. And it was just very unique, and it's hard for me to explain even as I'm reflecting right now, but that was just, it was Chris's elk, but it was also our elk. It was our mark of success and hard work paying off for the entire group for the trip. And that's what was really cool. And I certainly felt that. Galen obviously felt that. And Chris was just ecstatic having taken his first elk as well. So we made it down there, got to the bull. A really cool animal. Just impressive to actually be kneeling down next to one and to get to put your hands on one again, even though it's Chris's bull. I was very humbled by these animals. It's impressive the country that they live in and what they endure, how quickly they can cover ground in terrain and everything that was kicking my butt. A lot of respect for them, no doubt about that. But So we take pictures and do all that kind of stuff, and then it at this point, like, Chris shot him at like 2:30 in the afternoon. So we have enough time if we, keep moving to hopefully get this thing back to camp before dark. But Galen wanted to debone everything on the mountain. He's like, I don't take bone off the mountain. I debone everything up here. Don't want the weight if we don't need it. So we debone everything up here. So Chris and I started skinning, or Galen started skinning, and then I started helping out and everything. Chris is jumping in there and helping out. And Galen looks at me. He's like, you've skinned deer before, right? I was like, yeah. He goes, all right, it's just like a big deer. You keep skinning. I'm going to go get the horses. I'll be back in like 45 minutes, an hour, whatever. So he takes off. So Chris and I finished skinning this elk out. And it was about 45 to an hour after that Galen came back with the horses. And this is just, I hope the film that we produce can somewhat reflect this for you guys. This is just, if terrain could be chaotic, this is it. There's just deadfall, there's rocks, there's ledges, it's steep grade, just all of it right there. And again, thoroughly impressed by these horses. They were like mountain goats. Galen rode them and brought them right up to that elk. We deboned it there on the mountain, packed it in the saddle panniers on the horses, and rode it right out of there. Came rolling back into camp right before dark. It couldn't have happened any better. So that was a really, really cool experience. Something that I'll never forget, something that I'm grateful, again, to have podcasts and films and all this kind of stuff to look back on, because that, obviously, this was the highlight of the hunt. This was the highlight of the entire week up there, was being successful and being able to take out this elk. And we found out later, when we were actually riding out on the last day back to the horses, there was this little house and everything back there in the mountains that we would have to ride past. We rode past it going in, came back past it going out. And the lady that lives there, she came out when we were coming back out, and she told Galen that we were the only hunting party that had gone past them this year that had come out with an elk, which was also pretty impressive and kind of makes you feel better despite all your struggles. Like, okay, we're the ones that got it done. All right, the hard work was worth it. The hard work paid off. So we continued to hunt after that. We still had another day or two before we would have to pack up and head out. So we continued to hunt. Again, saw a lot of different country, changed the tactics up. We even split. Galen and Chris went one way. Ben and I went another. And like Ben and I dove deep, and we're going down into these valleys and hunting in a lot closer environments, a lot close quarters. When it got down in there, ton of elk sign everywhere, just could not find the herd, could not find the elk themselves. So that presented challenges, and by the end of the week, like, we're all getting to the point where we're gassed. Like, I'm just gassed from like I mentioned in the beginning, at this point, my feet are what's destroying me the most at this point, in my poor choices when it came to footwear and preparation to go out there. And Galen and the other guys have been working their butts off since they got up there, and everything's kind of coming to a head. Everybody's kind of wearing down. So that's when the decision was made. It's like, all right, we're going to pack out. Not to mention that on the very last afternoon of hunting, and this was another humbling moment for me, we're on top of this mountain, and Ben and I are waiting on Galen and Chris to get back to the horses. We're actually looking at the next mountain range over, and a big fire had lit off over there at some point, and the wind was, carrying the smoke and everything. I have some pictures, and it was pretty impressive to look at. We were thankfully not in any danger of being close to that, but it's still a testament of how quickly this country can turn brutal and be a threat to you. But another testament to that is, at the same time that afternoon, the wind picked up, and it kind of turned into what I guess would be considered like a windstorm. And all this deadfall, these dead trees, they're still standing. Like, you would hear a crack and look over and just see one fall, just, right down the hill from you, or right close to you, whatever. And as we get back into camp, like that evening when we're taking care of the horses and cooking dinner and doing all this kind of stuff, like, you just hear up on the mountain on either side of you just these cracks and pops and crashes, and you're just multiple at a time, and it's just like, holy cow, this deadfall's just coming down everywhere. And we had picked a campsite where there wasn't a lot of deadfall or anything like that. We were in no risk of being in danger from camp itself, but it's like, if we go back up there, if we pull another day out of this hunt, we're going to be cutting our way back through some stuff again to get back up there. So the decision was made to pack out. And again, looking back on it, again, while this is Chris's elk and everything, at the same time, we all kind of shared that joy and that feeling of success in that, having all been a part of it in some form or fashion, and consider the trip a success, certainly on many different levels. But we decided to pack out. The story doesn't even end at that point, because while we rode in 2 days, we decided we're riding out in one. That's 25 miles on horseback in 1 day. So we load up, we wake up at like 4:30 in the morning, start packing up camp. We're rolling out of camp around 9:30, I think, is by the time we had eaten and had everything packed up. And a long story short, just a long and, while enjoyable as far as the country that you're in, like you spend 8.5 hours on the back of a horse covering 25 miles, it's a lot. It is a lot, and it wears you down pretty quick. But I was once again very appreciative for these horses and how put together and squared away they are, because like in the last 2-3 miles before we got back to the trailhead and where we parked the truck and the trailer, there was another hunting party that had been trying to work their way in and come in. And I feel bad for them, but as Galen said, everybody's gone through it at some point with their pack animals, but they had a bunch of green animals and they had fallen apart. There was people and horses and gear and mules and stuff scattered, like over a 2-mile stretch, just stuff everywhere and chaos that they were having to deal with. And I felt so bad for them. But it made you appreciate a string of 8 animals that we had with us that were just in a line, uniform the entire way, no issues, and navigating some pretty rough stuff. Made us very grateful for that. So we got back to the truck right before dark, got the horses fed, got the gear and the horses loaded up in the trailer, and we start driving off the mountain. We still have a 6-hour drive to get back to the house from where we were at. So we knew it was going to be a long night. We knew we'd be rolling back in at home midnight, 1 a.m., whatever it might be. But we hadn't even made it off the mountain yet. We weren't in cell range or anything yet. And I'll back up a little bit. Coming off this mountain, the same windstorm that we had experienced in some degree up on the mountain, something had come through in the week that we were up there, similar to that down below. And there were a bunch of trees that had been blown over the roadway coming out, and several of which, somebody had already come through and cut them out, but they were more than likely driving a smaller truck like a Toyota Tacoma or something like that, and not a Ford F-450 with a horse trailer on the back of it. So these gaps that Galen had to thread that truck and trailer through, literally he had inches on either side. Like there was no room for error on that, and it's dark outside now. So he's threading the needle on all these roads and with this down trees and all this kind of stuff, and getting the horse and the truck and the trailer out of there. We hadn't even gotten to the summit of the mountain yet or anything, coming out on the road, and we hear and feel kapow on the driver's side of the rig, and we just blew a tire on the trailer. So we stop and we get out and walk around, and we did just blow a tire on the left side of the trailer, but this is a 20-foot, livestock trailer. There's 2 wheels, 2 tires on each side. The front tire's blown, the fender is ripped off, and the back tire and wheel and everything is nowhere to be found. It's completely gone. And it's just like, oh, this is not something that you normally prepare for, or that we even would figure we'd have to deal with. So Galen had one spare that he had gotten off of a different horse trailer. Well, come to find out, while the lug pattern and everything was correct, the wheel itself would not fit over the hub assembly. Flush, that is. There was just like it was a centimeter difference, and it was very frustrating. So what we ended up having to do at this point, it's like 10 at night, we ended up taking a good tire off of the good side of the trailer and putting it on the bad side. So essentially now, we did screw that tire that didn't fit over the hub assembly. We did bolt it on just as much as we could, just because something's better than nothing at that point, right? So we had 2.5 tires and wheels, I would say, at this point on this horse trailer, with 9,000 pounds of horses and mules in the back, and a long way to go. And we just started creeping. Like, that's all you can do at that point. We couldn't go more than 5-7 miles an hour down the dirt road coming off that mountain. And we just cranked the music up and started creeping and kept checking our phones and everything for service and everything, which I will mention this for anybody that does backcountry hunts and experiences like this. This is a useful tool. On iPhones, I can't speak for Android folks, but on iPhones now, the latest iPhone update that came out, it does allow you to satellite text message from your phone. The same as like what an inReach or something like that would do for you. You can do that just through iPhone and everything now. But for some reason, at this point in our adventures, it was not like we couldn't find a satellite to ping off of or whatever, so our text messaging was done. So we creep this trailer and these horses and this rig back to, we get to Blacktop, and it was about the time we got to Blacktop that Galen was able to get a text message out to one of his brothers that was still awake. That was the other thing, is can we get a hold of somebody who's still awake at 11 o'clock midnight, whatever it was. So he was able to get a text message to one of his brothers to go get another truck and another trailer and start heading that way to help us out. And then we got on Blacktop and once again just started creeping. Like, we're not going to stop and camp. We don't have any feed or anything overnight for these horses. Like, we're just going to get as far as we can. So we just start creeping. Again, just hammer down at 15, 20 miles an hour on the Blacktop with a couple of tires that are extremely overloaded at the moment, and see how far we can get. And we had no other issues, thankfully. We at one point, a couple hours later, 2-3 hours later, we saw headlights coming the other way, and there was Galen's brother with another trailer. So we offload the horses into his trailer, and once we got all that weight out of there, the trailer's relatively lighter at that point, obviously, so we were able to go more normal speeds the rest of the way home. Came rolling back into the house at about 5:30 or so. So we were up for 25, 26 hours by the time we finally got to bed and got some sleep on the adventure coming out. So definitely not what we thought about, but once again, one of those things that you can't make up, and just gotta take the punches as they come and deal with it, as it may be. So I mean, that summarizes our trip. That's the long version, if you will, of the story and the bits and pieces of it and stuff. Again, this was an experience for me that I wouldn't trade. I would certainly do things differently if I had to do over again, or if I ever do it again. I will be better prepared and do a lot of things differently on my own part. But as far as taking advantage and getting to experience the opportunity that was in front of me, that was something that just it's even hard to put into words to a certain extent. There's the beauty side of being out there, as far as physically what you can see with your eyes in the country that you're in. You're looking at country and mountains and places that very few humans have seen, especially today's day and age of folk. And that's humbling to know that there are places like that in this world that still exist, places that you can go. You might have to work to get there, but you can experience them. There's a mental side that's beneficial. We talk on this show a lot about how social media and technology and everything are beneficial, and how they can be beneficial, I guess I should say, in today's day and age of hunting and outdoorsmen. But a person needs to be able to disconnect from all that as well. And I certainly feel like I benefited from that. Being able to be unplugged and be out in just nature, where it's you, the guys you're with, and God, pretty much. That's therapeutic. A person needs that, in my opinion. And then there's the mental side that you got to work through too. I talked earlier about, just you gotta work through the shock of being that far away from anything. Cause it's like, I asked Galen at one point, I'm like, so how long would it take somebody to get to us if something happened to one of us? And he's like, man, from the time they get notified, a helicopter is probably an hour and a half, 2 hours from us. And then you're looking at the same amount of time to get back out of here. So that puts things in perspective. Like, every move needs to be calculated. And again, you're putting a lot of trust in those animals, but you got to believe that those animals know their stuff, and they prove their worth more times than not. But for us as individuals, we had to be calculated with our moves. We had to be strategic down to, considering when and where we're going to get water or be able to refill water, whatever that might be. So a lot of thought has to go into stuff like that, because that country is literally just you, the guys you're with, and the stuff you bring with you. And if you don't have it, you can't get it. And you need to be able to make do without it, or if it's something important, it could be the end of you. So definitely a humbling experience from that point, and understanding how beautiful and brutal this environment can be. So an experience that, again, I value, and that I probably will do again at some point. It might not be next year, but at some point I will probably do a hunt like this again, knowing better now what all is entailed. I certainly will do an elk hunt again, because while I talked about how much I still value Chris's elk and getting to be a part of that myself, I still haven't punched an elk tag of my own, and I still haven't flung an arrow at one. I've had one in my sights, which was pretty stinking cool in and of itself, but you want to bring one home, and I still do, and it's still on the bucket list. So one day soon, hopefully we'll be crossing that one off. But I appreciate you guys sticking with us. I appreciate you guys listening to this point. My goal with this podcast was to, in detail, go through the entire trip from my perspective and talk about some of these things that resonated with me, some of these things that were important to me, some of these things that I'll never forget. And we are, I've alluded to it, I don't know if I mentioned it in this episode or last week's episode, but we are producing a film around this experience in Idaho. We filmed a lot up there, far more footage than we'll probably ever use, but we're going to put something together that, and I don't know when this podcast will release, but if it's not out already or doesn't have a set date that's been announced for it to come out, it will be soon. So please keep an eye out for that, because I want you guys to be able to see, like I said, everything that I've talked about and everything that we went through, and all that kind of stuff. But even for film or stuff like that, like, there's a certain extent of it that hits the high points, but it doesn't necessarily show the daily grind. And it was a daily grind. It's far more than hunting. And I guess that's the last thing that I'll mention. And the one thing that I haven't said yet is it's not like hunting down here where you're in camp and you can go and be in the stand, an hour before light and sit all day if you want to and come back after dark. there was a whole lot more to it. It was, hunting was a part of life up there, but it wasn't the only focus up there, because you have livestock up there with you at this point, and you have to be mindful of your environment. So the horses had to be taken care of every day in the morning and the evening, and had to be situated for the afternoon and overnight. And I mentioned earlier how we were camping at 6,800 feet and hunting at 8,200 feet elevation. So we would, with the route that we had to take coming off the mountain, if we didn't have to, we really didn't want to ride down that hillside and through that country in the dark. So while we might hunt until sunset or as late as we possibly could, we normally would have to save that last little bit of light, if we could, for getting off the mountain and back to camp with the horses. So there was other things like that you don't really think about until you're in it. And it just goes back to while we are in the mountains hunting, we're also in the mountains living. And there are a lot of different things that have to take place and that have to get accomplished and done while we're up there. So that was just another unique thing that, again, you just don't think about being a flatlander and having never done a pack trip before, for going up there. But in conclusion, I once again want to thank the Barnett family and Galen for all of their hard work in making a trip like this happen, for taking a chance on a flatlander like me and let me join them and tag along. A bow hunter on top of that, adding, as if I didn't add enough challenges to the hunting party, you put an archery hunter in there as well, who's set in his ways. That's a whole nother element, as Galen learned, and I think Galen kind of enjoyed. He definitely got an adrenaline rush from playing that bull for so long and getting him in so close. So I want to thank you guys. I really appreciate all the hard work. I want to thank Chris and Ben, as I've said before, for everything that they did on the hunt and for the group to keep things running smoothly. Ben was an absolute beast, just working around camp and everything, and Chris too, chopping wood and getting everything situated and stuff. Just they live up there and they've experienced a mountain camp before, so they know the things that need to get done, and helping me understand that and teach me that was awesome. So I appreciate you guys and your hard work and everything with that. And then to just the families, to my wife and my family and Galen's family back home and everything. My wife and kids actually went with me on this trip and stayed with Galen's wife and kids while we were in the mountains. So we really appreciate you guys and letting us go out there and experience that, and everything that y'all did to help facilitate that and to make that happen on the bookends of the trip. So thank y'all for that as well. I'm going to hang it up with this one, guys, and I really, really appreciate y'all tuning in again, as I just take a second on here to reflect on a trip that's been memorable for me. I hope you guys enjoyed listening. I hope you guys maybe got some out of it. If you guys have any questions about anything, if you want to know in greater detail about anything that I've talked about, I've mentioned on here, I'm happy to share it with you. Please hit us up in the comments or send us a message through the website or on social media, whatever it might be. I'd be happy to talk to you guys about it. Or if you guys are planning a trip like this, or wanting to experience something like this for yourself in your own regard, and you want to know in greater detail some of the things that I learned, or the do's and the don'ts, what I would do differently, reach out. I'll discuss it with anybody. There's no secrets in my opinion. So appreciate y'all listening to another Fall Obsession podcast. We're going to wrap this one up, and we'll be back again with you guys next week. Catch you then.